Yeah, the flat cap look. I love it.
Yeah, well, you might.
Well, we saw a flat cap on Prince Philip's at his funeral, didn't we?
Yeah, but not indoors.
Oh yeah, good point. Good point. Yes, I didn't realise you were such a keen follower of etiquette.
Well, one tries. You got to. You got the colonies coming in.
Right. Okay. That's the chat on. Right. So what have we got? We've got 2 minutes to go.
Have we?
Yeah.
That's almost.
We're going to be very timely.
That's almost like a funereal silence right there.
So, Rob, is it true that you grew up with Charles in Kent?
I don't know whether I ever grew up, but yes, I think I've been fishing with Charles for over 50 years, one way or another.
Yeah, it's a long time to put up with me, frankly, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say,
everyone has to go and listen to all this diatribe. I feel sorry for all of you, really. But there we are.
Well, I have to say, Charles, yeah, do you remember when we used to do those red letter days?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And
they're still talked about, bless them. I mean, people still, I went on your red letter day. I was thinking, we must have done more than we thought.
Well, we must have put through over 1,000 people in those 4 or 5 years.
And there was a wonderful eclectic mix too. That's what was so lovely about it. You had all sorts of people from absolute raw beginners to really quite good.
Great success. It's a great success. Right. Well, the clock has ticked to 7 o'clock. I'd like to say hello to everyone. Delighted to see you all for another round of hero versus villain. I've lost count of how many Charles and me have done now. I think we must be getting close to double digits. And this is our first ever international edition, and at a new time and a new day. And we'd really like to welcome everyone who's dialed in from abroad, from the States and from down under and all over everywhere. It's really lovely to see you. So we want to have a bit of an international bent about this discussion. So, and Teddy says hello everyone from Italy. So which is a timely reminder for me to say to everyone, I'm going to man the chat box. So if you'd like to ask a question during the hour before we throw it open, before we invite you to unmute and ask a question, just type it in and then I'll read it out. But other than that, there are no rules in this debate other than we all like to be nice to each other. This is not about getting chunks out of each other and scoring points. So the premise of this
might not be for you.
Oh, English, come on, Charles, bit of English decorum,
Okay.
So the big question is does fly fishing mean different things to different people, to different nationalities? Has the term fly got lost in translation in recent years? Are techniques and practices being exported across borders? And if so, is that always a good thing? And ultimately, are we remaining true to the founding fathers of fly fishing, such as Halford and, dare I say it, Skews? And perhaps most controversially, I have here, some people might claim, the greatest work of fiction, 93 pages of fishing porn, the 2021 edition of the Footing Mill catalogue. Do any of these things exist in nature? I mean, there's a fantastic page of blobs that I can't find for the moment. Can these be constituted as flies? And then we're going to try and move the discussion along, talk about outside influences, how different countries have cross-pollinated other countries, talk about when a fly is a fly. Is it all about imitation? Because if it's all about imitation, is a perfectly tied blue-winged olive as equally valid as a perfectly tied bullhead imitation? That's a question to ask. And then we'll get into the world of techniques, check nymphing, tenkara.
How long is this thing, Simon?
Not much longer, I'm nearly there.
No. I meant to do techniques, flies, blob is worth an hour on its own, and a few other things. We're coming, and a lot of people actually on this call will not know what a blob is, mercifully, thankfully.
Mercifully, it looks like a bit of bright day-glow snot with a hook in it.
That's good, actually. I like that.
And then the other final thing, and this was actually something Charles and I discussed quite a lot prior to this, is casting fundamental to fly fishing? So Charles, I'm going to hand it over to you to get the ball rolling.
Well, I've got Rob coming in, and I've always played the devil's advocate on this one. And I would say that, and Marshall and a few others know my inner thoughts on tenkara and all the rest of it. I believe if you are going to fly fish, then it really should be done by fly casting. Now, whether that fly interprets something in your imagination or something in nature is open to debate here. But just dapping it on the water has not moved our narrative much further than actually when Charles Cotton was dabbing around in Derbyshire. Or indeed, people were probably in Japan doing it hundreds of years before, or indeed in northern Italy, where there's been a style used up there with a similar operation to tenkara. So, but I had this debate with Paul Gaskell, who said, "Yes, you cast with a tenkara rod." Really, I've yet to cast at any substantial distance with a tenkara rod, much beyond about 2 rod lengths out. Yes, you dab around and you flop around in the air with it, but in essence, it isn't fly casting. It isn't about precision. It's about getting the fly on the water. Now, sorry, go on.
So Charles, so is your contention that if you don't cast the fly, it doesn't count as fly fishing?
Well, you see, this brings us into a whole new world. Now, this brings in our wonderful friends from America. Now, you have been absolutely savaged, and that is the right word, savaged by a term called Euro-nymphing. Now, Euro-nymphing, as we all know, is something that you actually stand in a river and you dob your fly around and you do it on a fixed line. It's fixed line fishing. Actually, I saw fixed line fishing going on in Colorado around about 1980. I don't suppose they realized that they were originating Euro-nymphing, but they were. In essence, but again, it's not about casting. You try and cast a 1 or a 0 weight fly line that's probably even about the same diameter as backing, Simon, any great length. If you're fishing on the banks of, say, Blagden or Chew or some reservoir, or in the sea, for instance, it's a nice, quaint idea to cast around your feet, but it's probably highly unproductive. So, this is where I think the crossroads has come. It's terribly effective. Don't get me wrong. If you want to get a newcomer, or indeed anyone, to catch a volume of fish at a short and a very compacted area of time, Euro-nymphing is a way to go. You can really get, well, there's one from Teddy, French nymphing don't use line at all. This is what I'm talking about. When you're talking about Czech nymphing, it is done with nylon. It is done with just nothing more than, all right, you can tape your nylon as the French do, and they have very long ones. But it's still very difficult to cast, especially if you've got 3 weighted bugs hell bent on taking your head off. So this is my problem with it, Simon. This is where I think we really got to start looking at the ethics behind what we do, not the fly, the technique.
So do you think there's any danger that, I think we've done very well, all of us sitting here, in sort of demystifying fly fishing in the past, certainly in my lifetime, and making it more accessible and making it all more egalitarian. Do you think there's a danger in being very prescriptive about saying fly fishing must be about casting?
Well, look where we've got Alford and Skews, and they're still arguing about it today. No, I don't think you can be dogmatic, and I don't think you can legislate what one person does. All I'm saying is that there should be a definition, and there should be an idea of what constitutes fly fishing. Not whether people should do it or not do it. That's up to them. You know, we live in a society that allows you to do this stuff, but where the division comes, where the fundamental is on whether you use a fly line to load a rod and you go through an arc and a parabola overhead in terms of pitching your fly where you want it to go. And that takes consummate skill. That's why fly fishing is slightly more difficult than, you know, every other branch of the sport, because you have to learn the mechanics. You have to know about rotation. You have to know. I mean, we've got a number of really, really good fly casting instructors on this program. They'd be out of job if they were just gonna get someone to dab the fly around their feet, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. I mean, so I mean certainly for me, and I'm sure a lot of people would agree with this, one of the great pleasures of fly fishing is actually casting. Yeah,
and you know, whether you do it well or whether you do it badly is immaterial. It's actually a situation whereby it gives you pleasure to actually maneuver that fly. I mean, salmon fishing. I mean, there's a classic example, Atlantic salmon fishing. My goodness me, Simon, you better enjoy fly casting, because there's an awful lot of it between fish. And I think there's probably a number of steelheaders would say the same thing. There's so many things coming through here on the feed that really, I'd like to take some of those if we can.
Shall I read them out, or couple?
Yeah, I think so, because they're germane to the argument, and I think they should be read.
Okay, so first question: are these wretched blobs?
There they are, beautiful.
There they are.
You know, I'll tell you a funny story about those before we go.
Well, I'll just add the question, and then you can add it. Are they an egg fly imitation?
Well, everyone tries to tell you they're this, that, or all the other. I mean, I've been told that they're actually a little mini cluster of Daphnia. Now, if you believe that, you'll believe any damn thing. You'll believe that, you know, the moon is made of cheese, frankly. Now, the depressing thing is that you use very often a blob, which is a highly coloured ball of sort of translucent chenille, on the point of a leader system for still water fishing. This isn't for rivers, by the way. Those of you that only fish rivers, it is purely come out of the still water boom. And you put this lovingly on the fly to attract the fish in, so they cunningly avoid that because it's a beastly colour, to take the nymphs that so cunningly up the leader from it. Do they ever get past the blob? Seldom. And that is the most nauseating, depressing thing of all. It's that. So anyway, right, there you are. There's a blob for you.
I think you made your views on blobs pretty abundant here.
I use them. That's a depressing thing. I do.
So I'll go down to this. Teddy, as Charles said, thanks, Teddy. French nymphing, they don't use a line at all. Morris asked the question: is the definition of fly fishing the use of a fly rod with a fly line?
Yeah, I think that's nice and neat. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Well done, Morris. Hey.
Mike Fox, he's weighing into the Tenkara debate.
Oh, no.
Tenkara in fly fishing is no different to whip fishing in coarse fishing. It's just another method within the greatest subject of angling.
Well, you know what, Mike, I'd be absolutely in agreement with you there. And I said the same, you know, I said it was tantamount to a telescopic pole, isn't it? And I got withering criticism like you would not believe from the aficionados. and then we get talking about Lillians. Well, the only Lillian I know was an aunt that I had up in Cheshire, frankly, who used to always buy a pair of kippers. She lived on her own, but she always bought a pair of kippers because she thought that's how they came and had to throw away one. That was a Lillian. Yes, so I'm with you. Mike, I'm absolutely with you.
Good, excellent. Michael Schweik, sorry, Mike, if I've pronounced your name incorrectly. And this is a very good,
Michael.
Sorry, Michael. This is a very good point. The IGFA, the International Game Fishing Association, defines for the sake of world records that the fly has to be cast. They do not differentiate between these methods and only care about the lure at the end of the line.
I think we can all go home now, actually. Thank you, Michael. Well done. You've saved everybody something there. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, so, Charles, have you ever had a record fish?
Yes. I had a Spartic trout for about a nanosecond that was the world record. And it was beaten the next day because they put in bigger ones. But I held the record for a while.
That's a truly tragic story.
No, it isn't. It isn't. It is what it is. I mean, it's about fish culture as opposed to fishing.
I was most
debate. Oh, Lord.
I was most disappointed. I was hoping we were going to get the world golden trout record here because
I'm sure there's people here that might have it.
Because Trevor at Allenbrook had grown this enormous one. Yeah. But unfortunately, he decided that when he closed the fish farm down at the end of last year, he was going to stuff it. So
well, at least it's there for posterity.
There for posterity. Yes, here it would have just been eaten by the otters. Marshall to everyone. In LA, we have, in LA, we have limited local fishing. Casting and fly tying have become valid separate sports.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I don't know if fly tying can be called a contact sport, Marshall, but I've seen Steve talking about winging, and that invokes quite a lot of stuff, really, between protagonists. I think casting is a separate entity, and fly tying is almost a separate entity. I think they can be done in spite of what we do in fishing, and that's proven with the tournaments, with what goes on in San Francisco. The Golden Gate? I think so, where they have tournaments, and all over the place. And it's where a crossroad comes, and there's nothing to stop you exploring the avenues within fishing. But I think we're here to actually talk about fly fishing as determined on the water as opposed outside as a recreation, really.
Sure. I'd just like, because Rob's on the call from Colorado, and Rob, is competition casting quite established and a big thing in the United States?
Oh, I think Marshall could probably answer that better than I can, but yeah, and more in the areas where, like LA, where they have casting ponds, and the whole thing, as he says, is almost a separate entity.
Wow.
I know a whole fraternity of brilliant casters, usually FFI masters, CIs. They spend most of their time casting and instructing, and they rarely go fishing. But that's fine with them. They're okay with it. It's become their sport.
My point to you is this: if as an instructor, you do this wonderful excellence and you hit that pinnacle of achievement, doing sublime double hauls or spays or whatever it happens to be, and then that person comes along for instruction and said, right, now I need to catch that trout in a certain situation. What fly do I use? How do I present it? What tippet do I use? If, as an instructor or a coach, I cannot answer that question fully and accurately, what am I doing there?
What you're doing is you've accepted, like I said earlier, that casting has, in some sense, become separated from fly fishing, which is sad.
But that's not the point.
Yeah,
the
well,
point.
that's the outcome. And yeah, I mean, I agree. You should be able to, as an instructor, be well-rounded. You should be able to discuss leaders and fly, all of that stuff.
You know, if I'm
Yes.
going down onto one of Gary Bueller's trips, and my goodness me, isn't he catching some fantastic fish at the moment, the swine?
Oh.
You know, and I go to an instructor, say, look, I've got to send a popper through the air on a 9-weight or a 10-weight or whatever it is, and then, you know, plant that whatever grain shooting head out there. So, oh, no, I don't do that. I just do casting at hoops.
Well, a good instructor will, I mean, an FFI instructor will know these things. That's part of the training. My point really was more that it's casting and to some degree fly tying, at least in my community, have become just kind of separate activities that are not always very related to fishing. I mean, and people have accepted that.
I think it's a little bit like fox hunting, where some people ride to hunt and some people hunt to ride. I think there are some people that cast to fish, and there are people that they have to, you know, their casting is what they like to do.
But thankfully, they haven't banned fishing yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I always thought Oscar Wilde had it about fox hunting. What did he say? It was
I thought that was Sassoon.
the unspeakable in pursuit of the inedible.
I thought that was Sassoon that said that.
It probably was. Yes, it's strange. I mean, I remember years ago I ran a reader offer in the Fly Fishing and Fly Tying magazine. And it was a sort of tuition weekend. For beginners, I was amazed the number of regular readers from Fly Fishing and Fly Tying magazine who came along to the weekend, who'd been tying for years and had never cast a fly in all their life and had never actually caught a trout till that moment. So,
oh, well. So
Steve Fernandez says, so one can swing a fly for a steelhead or high stick with a crazy Charlie. Both use fly lines. Whoops. This blurs the notion of pure casting. So is it the artfulness that's important?
Crikey, that's quite cerebral, Steve. I think artfulness, you know, that begs the question: is it a sport to outwit something with the brain the size of a pea, which is slightly depressing? But I think trying to lump a spey cast or a perry poke or whatever it happens to be for steelhead in, you know, when your hands are cold and you know you're in the snake or wherever, and then pitch out that, you know, popsicle or whatever it happens to be out in the current, is slightly different to perhaps just dobbing a fly around a rock when you're French nymphing. I think they're both, oddly enough, skillful. I'm not sure about artful. Certainly, I'm not sure the high stick with a crazy Charlie would necessarily be a good idea. I'd want some other options than that, Steve. But I would honestly say that the understanding of when you're using a fixed line and the nymphs in relationship to one another, you know, the people like Lance Egan, Devin Olsen, and these people have codified and really uniquely blended the competition world with their actual fishing on stream, be it in, you know, Colorado or wherever it happens to be. But they've become very, very efficient at understanding how to fish their flies in the water column. That to me is artful, actually. I think that is artful. Getting your fly to actually swing, know how to mend, and do all sorts of other things, I think too is artful. So I think you can blend and massage the whole lot together. It's a very difficult question. The subject matter we've tiptoed into is absolutely pocketed with mines, and you're likely to tread on one. actually.
So here's a question, Charles, for you, and maybe someone else can jump in if they know the answer. In the World Fly Fishing Championship, are there any strict regulations about how you fish a fly? Could you use a tenkara rod, for instance? Could you use a whip?
No, you can't. You couldn't use a tenkara. It's got to be a conventional fly rod. It's got to fit within a certain size and length. Your lines have got to be manufactured. They can't be made. Your leader length cannot be entirely made of nylon. It's got to be, I think it's 18 feet, 16, 18 feet. And you're limited to the size
Can't be longer than twice the length of the rod, I think.
Yeah, but it's been knocked down even more now. I think it's got to be a certain size. So and also your bead size can't be beyond, I think, about 4 mil. You can put a couple on the fly, and you mustn't have. I think you've got to have. You can have one exposed, and the other ones have got to be covered, as far as I'm aware. So it is. The Fitzmoosh rules are pretty draconian, Simon. They really
So one way and another, we do by default actually, and we have the IGFA rules and we have the World Fly Fishing Champion rules. So actually, there is a fairly tight definition of what fly fishing is.
Yeah, there is.
When you actually come down to it.
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we've got some other good questions here. But perhaps a really good fly fisher is someone who knows all the techniques and when to apply them, bearing in mind the conditions and etiquette, and I'll add local rules.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm still learning a couple of them. So, I've got a ways to go yet. I think it's almost impossible to know a huge amount about every branch of the sport, Simon. I think you tend to choose too, I think, and I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I think you tend to select the things that you actually want to, that give you pleasure. And I think this is the thing that people must not lose sight of, that you go fishing or you go fly casting or you go tie flying.
I think I mean fly tying.
I know, I mean tie flying. I think you do those things to give you real pleasure.
I actually thought, funny enough, when you started off that answer, the word pleasure popped into my head as well. And it is, I think, really important that I think it's interesting to discuss fly fishing and what defines a fly, but ultimately it is about how you enjoy catching fish. And I have to confess, I think I've said this on the previous debate, I enjoy more than anything else in the whole wide world catching a fish on a dry fly. I mean, for me, that however big the fish, however competitive the situation, ultimately seeing a fish rise, casting a dry fly to catch it, that moment when the fish, you see the fish, or you see the fish, see the fly, and you know that fish is going to take your fly. For me, that is the crack cocaine of fly fishing, and it's absolutely what I enjoy. And that will be the bit about fly fishing I will enjoy till the very day I die.
Now, my friends in America will not ever believe this, but in the car there's a 7'8" number 3 weight fly rod that's giving me more pleasure to fish than almost anything I can think of. I almost choose the rivers that I go to fish it on because I like using it. I like fishing in the places where it takes me, and the fish are seldom big, but they don't have to be. So I've actually come full circle. Now, my dear friend, Leanne Swanson, to everyone, I agree. I'd love to know what actually that lovely and wonderful fly casting lady is actually agreeing to everything. Leanne, where are you?
I don't know where I am.
Oh, there you are. Hello. What are
was
you agreeing to?
I was agreeing with Simon that dry fishing is the best. A lot of fun. Yeah, it's just my favorite part of fly fishing is dry fly
You
fishing.
can't see you because you're wearing camo. That's very good. That's a good top. Just vanished.
Yeah, no, first of all, thank you for agreeing with me. And I don't think you are wearing camo.
I'm not. I'm wearing blue.
I thought you looked lovely.
Camo-y?
I do have a UFO in the background from the light in the room, though.
Oh, that's
So here's a question for Charles first, and maybe everyone could just pile in on chat. Is there a fly you would never use on principle?
me. Oh God.
And anyone else come up with an answer on the
No,
chat?
I'm a lost soul. No. No.
Really?
I'm a person who was given by Ed Zern, and some of the Americans will know who I mean by Ed Zern. He was the late Ed Zern. He was the most magnificent outdoor writer. And Ed was fishing with me on the test, and he sort of somehow spirited out of his box a sculpin pattern that was about the same average dimension as a sparrow that flitted overhead. And he sort of nudged it into my hand and said, "Go on." And I said, "Oh, all right." And to compound it, I put 3 swan shot on just to get it down in the pool, and absolutely hammered fish with it. So no, I have no morals, I have no scruples, I have no principles.
Well, that's a Christmas card saved for the rest of my life. So here we are. We've got some great answers. Let's see what we've got. So Sid says egg flies. Morris, tongue in cheek. What is a fly? Leanne. Well, now I've been nice about your sweater. I'm not be nice again. No, I use them all.
Good girl. Well done.
I would not use a fly that doesn't work ever. Good point.
Well done, Michael. Yeah.
Matt says he's not going to use a squirmy wormy.
No.
Neil,
You're missing out, especially for grayling. If you fish grayling.
Neil says a chironomid.
Really? And now, Neil, come on. Why wouldn't you use a chironomid? Because they are, part of the non-biting midges. They're absolutely crucial and essential to we as still water fishers. And if we were without those, we'd lose 90% of our still water fly fishing. And
because everyone up here in Seattle casts a chironomid in a lake and watches a bobber and waits for it to move.
Oh, well, that's slightly different. That's called bait fishing. Yeah, I'm kind of with you there. But we do the same here. But with us, we'll use it on a long leader, maybe 20, maybe 26, maybe even 30 foot long, and cast it out and retrieve it. And that looks as though you're tying clink hammers there whilst you're chatting to us. Yeah, it's a high art form. It really is. And we've got various types of chironomids. We don't just put them under a suspension device and wait for that suspension device to go under.
But Charles, you're being a little bit disingenuous there, because if you weren't using chironomid, you put a blob on.
I would put a blob on, yes.
There you go. So
Well, not
you
always.
don't need the chironomid.
Not always. No, not always. I don't. No, absolutely not. But sometimes, yes, I do. But then, as I've told you, I have no morals, no scruples, no moral compass whatsoever when it comes to fly fishing.
Well, you and Mike Fox, you should get together. He's going to use anything if permitted. So.
Oh, there you go.
There we go. Well, there we are. So I think we're all
that really is it. That's it, Simon. I think as long as it's within the rules that are laid down and set down on that fishery or in that area, because what I wouldn't want to do is go to, say, a blue ribbon stream for those in America, and do something that was wrong or disingenuous to that fishery. And I think that's the thing. That is absolutely. We do have a moral code. I know I was slightly papering over that, but when it comes, I not knowingly have ever broken a fishery rule. I never have, because they're there as a guideline. Not, it's a bit like a speed limit. We all exceed them now and again, but actually it's an advisory, and you shouldn't go up to it. You should stay underneath it. It's an advisory to stay, and it's there probably for a goodish reason, especially around schools. Now, whether you choose to exceed it or not is up to you, but it's still there as some kind of compass for us to go by.
Yeah, yes, and I think it's important to understand that if you really want to catch fish, fly fishing is probably not the sport for you. Yeah, we set the bar. We set the bar of difficulty absurdly high, really, sometimes. So, Teddy, don't you think that fly fishing is a wonderful mix of skills like casting, having some knowledge of entomology, knowing how to read the water you're fishing, approaching the fish properly, and much more? If you don't do any of these things, I think you're missing something in our sport. Sorry for my English, mates. Well, it's better than my English.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Your use of English is exemplary, and you know it. It's a lovely one here from Michael about dry fly fishing, and he was on the Meon today with the 16 Adams. I mean that's everybody's go-to. It doesn't matter. I should think everyone on this call here this evening. What would you use if you were stuck with and only had one fly to go with? And it's probably going to be a size 16 parachute Adams. Now, come on, let's be jolly honest about this. It is the fly equivalent of a 9'5" weight. It really is.
Yeah, I have to confess, I was guiding my wife on the Allen last Sunday, and we put on the size 14. Sorry, terrible. And yes, we cleaned up with that, and I had to cut it off. I thought we got to try something else. But here's a question: Charles, what would have that fly been 50 years ago? Because it wouldn't have been a parachute Adams. As far as I was concerned, as far as I knew, the parachute Adams didn't exist when I was a teenager.
Well, it might. Well, no, I don't think it did. I mean, we did have parachute patterns, oddly enough. We had parachute patterns at the middle of the last century. I mean, Alex Martin had posts and hooks to put parachute hackles on. So it's not a new concept. But what fly it probably would be either a Wickham's Fancy or a Greenwell's Glory, I would think.
Yes.
I reckon. In England. I don't know what it would be in it would probably be something like, I don't know, in the States it might well be one of the Catskill patterns, I would think. What was it, 50 years ago, did you say?
Yeah.
Let's think, what might it be? Someone help me out here. Blue quill, something like that. Steve, Mr. Fernandez, what would it be 50 years ago?
What would I was writing something? What would?
Oh, for goodness sake, pay attention, man. What would be the American go-to pattern 50 years ago? Like the Adams is now, the parachute Adams is now. What would it be, do you think?
Mosquito, maybe.
Royal Wolf, Adams, non-parachute at that time, although parachutes were available, but like a Royal Wolf and Adams, flies like that. Woolly worm before woolly bugger. Okay. Mother minnow. Those kind of flies were perhaps the ones that were.
There's a thing, and this is one for everyone. Whatever happened, someone got up in the night and stole the muddler minnow. It got eased out of our love affair with the muddler minnow. It's sort of gone, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of gone, but what happened was Dave Whitlock and others transformed it. Dave Whitlock, Jack Dennis, they made the flies, the sculpins and the spuddlers. If they didn't outright design them and or popularize them, that fly became something else. And even though the sculpin is a harder fly to tie, it captured the imagination because of its artfulness. I still tie mother minnows. I love them a lot, but other flies, like a woolly bugger, is just as effective or more so than a mother minnow. So here comes this argument again. Do we always simplify, or do we stay with something that's a little bit more artful?
Well, I think I like to push boundaries, you know that, and I know you do too. I mean, like to, with techniques or whatever, you love to push and see what you can do. You know, let's see what if, and that's always been my mantra. What if? And let's give it a shot. There's some great stuff. What about the clink hammer? Well, that's a great pattern, and it again, I mean, there's a lovely story there that's got bent out the shape, Simon. I mean, a clink hammer is, I think, is one of the national love affairs, you know, for everyone really. I mean, it's a great pattern that you can take almost anywhere as a you know, it's almost moved from being, you know, the royal wool of yesteryears or the grey wool to the modern equivalent. But it started life out in a drunken session in Holland, between Hans van Klinken and Hans de Groot, and they actually came up, they actually fused their various ideas, and that's how you got the clink hammer. And everyone has piled in and said it's Hans van Klinken and forgotten about dear old Hans de Groot, who had a huge...
Well, interesting, if you read Terry Lawton's book on the origin of the famous flies we all fish today, he actually alludes to that and actually, yeah, brings it. But, yeah.
Substances were also taken in the construction of that fly.
And yeah, I'm sure they weren't just sniffing the epoxy glue.
No,
But don't you think the thing that I notice about these flies we talk about most is that they're considerably easier to see and they float better than traditional chalk stream patterns?
Well, yeah, I mean, but you see, if you go up to Derbyshire, and this is going to astonish some of the people from various other countries that are on this call. If you go to these places, and if you went to Derbyshire and you went onto the Peacock Water at Roseley, and you fished a clink hammer, you would be thrown out.
Really?
Yeah, you'd be deemed as fishing a wet fly.
Wow.
A dry fly has to float on the surface, and that's in Derbyshire, for goodness sake. You know, that's not even on the chalk streams.
Well, I think I think it's in Derbyshire they have the club there on the, I could forget which one. I think it's on the Lathkill. It has had a dry fly only rule since predating Halford even.
Yeah, no, they get quite sniffy about their flies up there. They really do.
Yeah, no, it's very beautiful up there too.
Oh, it is, but quite draconian.
Yes, for some reason I love using a Tups indispensable. Strong association with my father, who introduced me to fly fishing.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a Tups indispensable. No, the intriguing thing here is I managed to get hold of the original material. Now, you know, this is not for, you know, perhaps, you know, sort of tea time discussion, but, you know, searching around fields for ram's testicle wool is probably not high on everybody's agenda, I would think, when they're looking for fly time materials. It takes us to strange places, but never so strange. But it's the yellow spaniel that defeated me. I mean, God knows what Austin was thinking when he came up with this idea. But anyway, be that as it may, I set about in the first lockdown that we went through, tying all the patterns I used to love to fish. Beacon Beige, which was, you know, my go-to chalk stream pattern.
You're very good just in that cusp between just before Mayfly starts.
Yeah, but I tied those, and I tied a Kites Imperial, which I love, and I tied some Tups indispensable, all on the right size hooks and all the rest of it. And I spent a long time trying them out last year, and I would like to give those flies to anyone who would care to have them in their box, because compared with what we use now, they were absolutely bloody useless. They really were. I mean, I had to cut the hackles away and everything else, and it was just not great.
You see, I think that's really important. The point you're making is that actually we've got far more particular about flies that fish well, rather than tolerating, you know, a green whale's glory that keeps sinking. Or
we've got a lovely one here from Mats in Sweden, on the river Storum. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Who says, you know, the 16 Sawyer nymph is his go-to pattern up there. And, you know, Mats, I imagine you probably know this, but Sawyer used to do a lot of fishing up in Scandinavia. And that's where he got the Scandinavian grey goose from, fishing up there, the spurwings. And, you know, oh gosh, Simon, I used to fish. Margaret Sawyer used to tie me my Sawyer's pheasant tail.
Because you knew Frank very well,
He
didn't
gave
you?
me my first ever proper casting lesson, did Frank,
Oh.
at a game fair. It was, and I fell under his thrall and his magic. He was an extraordinary man. I mean, he was a working river keeper with that knowledge of water and wisdom that you can only get from daily association in that world. And he was a quiet, remarkable man. He really was.
It's interesting. A lot of his techniques have fallen out of favor these days.
But
It's
have they?
interesting.
I mean, if you actually dissect his idea of nymph fishing.
Sorry, Charles, I was talking about his river keeping thing, but carry on.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, I mean, they were fairly expedient. I mean, they were looking to satisfy their clients, and you know, I think the modern river keeper probably is ripping out all the camp sheeting and everything else that was putting in. But you know, and that's probably good. I mean, that, you know, we've got a new age of rewilding on our rivers, which is doing a lot of benefits. It's offering habitat. It's doing all sorts of things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I always remember the first time I went to New Zealand, where I was in the back of Beyond on North Island and standing with the guide. He said, well, this is what we're going to try and produce this fly. He says, have you ever seen one of these? Yeah, pheasant tail nymph. I think I know what that is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know a lovely story about that. But let's hear from some people. We've been reading here, but you know, we're up to, do you know what, we've got quite a lot on the clock here already. So
so if someone would like to unmute themselves and ask
I'd love to hear people. No, that didn't work as well as it might. What have we got? Who have we got in there that's going to pitch in with a question? Michael's saying, well, so what makes a fly? What materials would you not use?
Yeah,
Michael, there you are. Yeah, thank goodness you speak.
No, I always speak. You speak. I speak.
Yeah, I know.
No, I've had this debate with people, you know, constantly, because especially of saltwater fishing, of the kind of materials that we're using, and they're like, that's a lure, that's not a fly. That's why I thought your topic here is kind of fascinating about that.
Well, this did crop up, Simon, didn't it, last time? And you know, I think we came to a conclusion, such as you ever can with these things, that if you have a fly that is not hand built and crafted, and adds more to construction and glue and all the rest of it, where the component parts are actually fused together by an outside influence, i.e., I don't know, epoxy or UV resin or whatever it happens to be. But if those are fused together where no fly tying thread or construction was used, I think you're getting into dangerous territory. I think you are. I think you are looking at more model making and more bait making rather than fly tying. I think, you know, if you watch, as you have many times, as I have, and you watch someone like Steve constructing a split quill wing that is just, oh, Mike Fox has popped up a copper wire nib, but you're still, Mike, you're still putting that wire on with your hand. You know, you still are. You're not actually gluing it on there. If you just use, I mean, somebody said, I came up with a red hook once upon a time, and people were just using a red hook. Well, you know, that's not fly fishing. That's just using a hook.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, but that, I mean, that's still got a tail. You still had to have tied that tail in, hadn't you?
Yes.
Well, Lee Wolf was starting to use flies that were strictly glue, where he would actually, you know, set feathers into something that was wet in glue and literally no thread on them
Gosh,
at
yes, I
all.
remember those, Steve. Yeah, those sort of, yeah. But I just don't think that's. I worry about that a bit.
I worry about certain things like that too. I see things that sort of stretch this envelope that we call fly tying. And for example, I can't stand squirmy wormies. What is that really a fly? Is that, you know, like a bass worm lashed onto a fly?
Yeah,
is it the fact that you use thread, call it a fly or not?
Yeah, it is. And I, you know, I always, you know, start looking slightly upstream and downstream when I put one on and fish for grayling in winter, I must admit, and start
You've
worrying.
admitted it. Forget it. Don't look anymore.
Rob doesn't care at all because he just slams it on anyway. I mean, he's just a man without any kind of morals at all.
Well, I've had this discussion with you before. We have a lot of flood irrigation here, and in the spring when they flood all the local fields, and I fish a squirmy, and those fish are rammed with worms. So I argue there that I'm actually matching the hatch.
Well, you're matching the occurrence. There's a lovely one here from Neil Hofberg to everyone. Can I jump in here, Simon?
Of course you can. Of course you can.
Fishing
we need to let Morris have a turn too.
Oh, right, we will. Actually, let me just quickly do this. I find that tying and fishing traditional flies like North Country spiders and early CDC flies can be very special. What are your thoughts on this? I think you're a man that dances in the footsteps of angels, Neil, frankly. You know, there is nothing more beautiful. And Marshall and Rob know this. You know, I've gone out to fish those rivers in Colorado with soft hackles. And it is the most beautiful, beautiful way of catching trout I can ever think of. Done it on the Henry's Fork at St. Anthony as well, when not many other flies were working, but fished upstream, where tradition used to have it that you did fish those flies. But sorry, Simon, you were saying that somebody wanted to come in.
Yeah, Morris, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, all I was going to say is, if any one of us was to ask an entomologist what is a fly, and then bring them to the things that we attach to the end of a fly line, how many of them do you think would associate those things with flies? So actually, I go back to this issue as fly fishing. Is it about what's at the end of the line, or is it about the control of the rod and the fly line that goes with it, irrespective of what is on the end of the line?
You see, Simon, I knew that somebody more intelligent than us on this call.
Well, I did actually go to the trouble of looking up the definition of a fly. So dictionary definition: to fly, to move through the air; water, fly, noun, any flying insect found in the vicinity of water, formerly also an aquatic insect.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, well, should a nymph be classified as a fly? And the simple answer is no, because you would never say an egg is a bird, even though it becomes a bird.
But a nymph is an aquatic insect, whereas a muddler minnow is never representative of an insect, a sculpin is never representative of an insect, a matuka is never representative of an insect, a Wickham's fancy, it's arguable, is never representative of an insect. And that's why I say, you know, a fly to an entomologist who's not a fisherman will follow the definition as you defined it, Simon.
Yeah, I think you're right.
As fishermen have veered
But
away
I think where it came from was actually when you had that thing where fly fishing was passed down the ages as dapping with things that buzzed on the surface. I give you Elian, and so forth and so on. And so there's always been that umbilical cord to there being flies in terms of the aquatic upright, you know, be they spent gnat or whatever they happen to be. Only recently have we broadened our whole aspect to encompass sculpins, bullheads, small fish, what have you, to imitate the diet of fish, and that be interpreted by our construction of flies that mimic those. What I would say, and the point I think I really wanted to make, was that you have fly tyers very much like Ollie Edwards and others who do these incredibly lifelike patterns. They take consummate skill to make them work, because you actually have to know something about the entomology behind those flies. And very often, because they're so hard and because they're so realistic, they don't work as well as dear old Lefty Cray used to say, a general purpose thing.
Well, it's funny you should say that, Charles, because Mike Fox has written, "Isn't fly tying an art in itself? My self-tied flies look nothing like the pro-tied flies, but they catch a lot of fish."
Yeah. What I'd love is Alan Middleton, our old friend Alan, who said, "Didn't Oliver kite fish with a bare hook at Abington?" It was probably two lakes, Alan, rather than Abington, I would imagine.
Yeah, because it didn't kite die in about 68.
Yeah. I think but I certainly would have done. You know, I was there when he was fishing with my dad, and I was treed by Alex Berrant's two Alsatians who didn't like me, so I scarpered up a tree to get away from them.
Well,
I didn't wait until autumn, thank God. But yeah, I remember that's the first time I ever saw Barry Wellham fish.
right.
I tell you what, he had a fly called the BW nymph, which wasn't a Barry Wellham nymph, it was a brown wool nymph. And it, you know, again, simplicity itself looked like nothing, and he caught the biggest fish I'd ever seen, and I was transformed. But what people forget is that Barry was one of the finest competitive fly casters in the world.
Yes, and I think that over the years I've seen some really great fly fishermen being fishing with them. And the thing is, actually, really good fly fishermen have that blend of really good casting, great presentation. They know how to, if they're fishing still waters or they're fishing a subsurface fly, they know how to move it. If they're fishing on the surface, they know how to control it, and they do have a good knowledge of, I use entomology in the widest sense of the word. They actually can understand what fish are looking to eat, and they present it in a way that make fish think, "Oh shit, I want that."
Yeah. If fish think, which is a worry in itself. But
well, yes, that's what Bob James, he always tells the story, as he went to see a friend of his working at the National History Museum to actually see if he could be shown the carp's brain. The bloke looked at him and said, "Do you realize how small it is?"
Yeah. That's a depressing thing.
Yeah.
But,
So anyone out there like to unmute themselves and ask a question? Anyone? If not, I think we're coming up to
must be one, because I know Rob wants to go fishing. He's desperate to go. So the snow will have stopped. I mean, he'll just be using his squirmies. The runoff will have probably just about gone through. Has it? I don't know. Stopped.
No, actually, it's been so cold we haven't got a lot of runoff yet, so we're lucky on that front.
So you might actually use a dry fly this afternoon.
I might, yeah.
You might. That would break a habit.
Oh, come on. Come on, we know that's not.
There is, and it got blown out this winter, hasn't it? There was a little back eddy where you used to get a congregation of rainbows and all sorts in there, and you used to have to pitch your fly in amongst foam, and anyone that's fished a white winged fly, a little tiny parachute in clusters of foam and still detect to take is, for me, the quintessence of a dry fly genius. I failed dreadfully, but it was the most absorbing. And again, you had to be accurate, and you had to work behind rocks, and you had to make yourself unobtrusive, and it brought the whole of fly fishing together.
And every 2 minutes, the guide's saying to you, remember, foam is home, home is foam.
Yeah, well, he lied, didn't he? I didn't. The only guide I've got out there is Rob. Oh, God. Anyway.
So I think it's been lovely to spend the hour with you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. I think we've largely concluded that the term fly fishing is large, wide.
It's as broad, darling, as the audience we have with us this evening.
Some of us are true to the Halfordian traditions. Others are bastardizing it by the moment. But just because I'm sharing this podcast with you, I'm not going to say anything nasty about it.
I think to me, it's a delivery system. So, like John Wilson used to call it, fly rodding rather than fly fishing.
I think that's it. We're the broadest of churches, Rob, and thank goodness for it, because it's brought so many different individuals to the sport.
Yeah.
And,
so we will meet with you all a little sometime in May. I mean, today I was out at Broadman's house on the test. There was the most huge hatch of Branham. I mean, it was like a thick.
But only fish rising.
There were a few rising, yes. I mean, I don't think trout like Branham that much.
No, they like the emergent. They like the pupa coming up just underneath the surface, and the Welsh have really nailed it. Some of the Usk fishers so good at that Branham fishing, but it's all done with emergers just coming out.
I could see, there were a few fish rising, but it was just the most colossal hatch. It was amazing to see. So when we meet again, we will be in the thick of the mayfly. I think judging by the feedback we've had from everyone, I think we'll probably stick with this time, Charles, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. But just to be absolutely certain, the mayfly for we in England is one giant beast like a green drake that you have out in America. Let's get that clear. And it stops traffic. It gets people into apoplexy, and it causes fights. And I think it's probably a very, very nice thing to say. Mayfly, villain or hero, there you are. That's
all right.
One. That's the next one.
We have it. Well, I have to say, from my rapacious commercial aspect, I'd be bankrupt if it wasn't for mayfly. Well, guys, thank you very much. It's been lovely. I'll say goodbye. Charles will sign off for us. It's been a pleasure, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Well, thank goodness the world is a much, much smaller place. Thank you all, and thanks for joining us. It's truly international. It's so good to see so many of my friends from America. Brian,
good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.